You're about to enter into a new world of knowledge, curiosities, and high strangeness. This is a podcast of Straight Up Strange Productions.
You're listening to Mysteries and Monsters. I'm your host, Paul Bestall. This week, I'm delighted to welcome legendary Scottish Fortean investigator Brian Allan to the show for the first time. Brian has had a lifelong interest in the strange and unusual and tells us some of his personal experiences and investigations, along with discussing his latest book, The Hole in the Sky. But before that, of course, don't forget you can support Mysteries and Monsters by signing up at patreon.com/Mysteries and Monsters. $4 a month gets you ad-free episodes guaranteed, early releases, bonus content, and more. Thank you to my latest patron, Paranews, and thank you to each and every one of you that continue to support me in the show. It is greatly appreciated. Mysteries and Monsters is across all social media platforms. Please subscribe to the Mysteries and Monsters channel on YouTube. You can also find our website at mysteriesandmonsters.com. And don't forget, you can get your t-shirts, mugs and stickers all from our exclusive merchandise site via TeePublic, and the links in the show notes too. Our intro and outro music are performed by the marvellous Weary Pines. Thank you as always to Dean Bestall for his wonderful artwork. The show is produced by Brennan Storr of the Ghost Story Guys. And Mysteries and Monsters is delighted to be a part of the Straight Up Strange network. So let's join Brian to discuss a life filled with unusual events and strange occurrences. In his latest book, The Hole in the Sky, Brian Allan ponders the possibilities that there are places across the earth where the veils are thinnest. Can we feasibly enter another world, and did our ancestors know far more than we give them the credit for? Brian, I am delighted to welcome you to Mysteries and Monsters.
And thank you very much, Paul, for asking me on. It's a delight to be here. Pleasure.
Hey, my pleasure. It's taken me 13 books to get you on, but here we are, my friend. Brian, you are one of the UK's most illustrious investigators and researchers of strange phenomena, in my opinion, my friend. You're a gentleman whose work I've been well aware of for the best part of 20 years, I would suggest.
Okay.
I've spoken and met with many of your colleagues and your cohorts, both in the world of ufology and north of the border as well. And so I'm very aware of you and your career, Brian, and the fact that you've basically had a life touched by strange experiences since you were in the cot.
Yeah, literally. The reason that I got into this was originally through ufology, but I say originally for ufology. Let's go back to when I'm 2 years of age, around. I'm lying in my cot. Now, in the bedroom was my father's, he had a baby grand piano. That gives you an idea. It's a big piano.
Yeah.
And he was also a professional musician, but that's another story. But I'm lying in my cot. It's an early morning. The sun's swimming past the foot of the cot because the window was like on the left and the right hand side beside the cot. The piano is like about 6 feet from me. And I grew up with this piano. I learned to play on it as well. But I'm lying in my cot looking out through the spars, and I woke up, opened my eyes, and standing about 6 feet from me, right in front of the piano, with his arms folded, is a figure about maybe 4 foot high. Its arms are folded and it's watching me. Now I can see this. This happened. Well, I'm 80 now, and this happened 78 years ago. Yeah. And I could remember this like it was yesterday, literally yesterday, because a lot of stuff happened in that room, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But when I woke up, this thing it's a one-piece green suit it's wearing. Arms are folded, and around its waist it had, I assume it was a belt of some kind, but the belt, it wasn't a buckle. It was like a device of some kind was on this belt. But anyway, being a kid, and because this thing wasn't threatening me, I wasn't frightened. So I closed my eyes, opened them, closed, and it was still there. So I just went back to sleep again, as kids do.
Yeah.
However, it wasn't until a little bit later that I was actually speaking to Daryl Sims. Daryl Sims, you probably heard of Daryl, yeah.
Yeah, spoke with Daryl.
Yeah, well, I was speaking to Daryl, and I mentioned this to him, and he said, "You were probably taken." Okay, and he said, but it looks a bit more than once.
Mm.
So at first I attributed this thing, because of its appearance, it was like a supernatural creature, a fairy.
Yeah.
Or an elf, or something like that. And because I'm only a child,
yeah.
And this is before ufology was like common knowledge, because this was 1946, around then.
Yeah.
And in the same room, a few months later, by this time I'm out of the cot, I've moved out of bed, a little single bed, and I had this, you would call it now a lucid dream.
Mm.
And this is long before disc-shaped UFOs were like par for the course for extraterrestrial spacecraft.
Yeah.
And I saw this massive UFO, and I knew that it was for me. This thing it would come for me.
Yeah.
And again, I wasn't frightened, and I just went back to sleep again.
Mm.
Now, I've had similar experiences throughout my entire life, and it wasn't until I had this conversation with Daryl that he said, "You were taken, my friend. You were taken."
Mm.
So, and it's only since then I realised that, well, maybe I was. But like I say, it never did me any harm, but it certainly shaped my life and my interests, literally from the day I was born till now. Mm. I'm still as keen on the subject of ufology and the paranormal as ever was. Although, to be fair, I think the paranormal has pretty much supplanted ufology, although there are elements of both, in each. They're both part and parcel of the same subject, I think.
Yes.
Although when I say that to dyed-in-the-wool ufologists, they get all humpty and they're not very happy about it. But it's a fact. I mean, I think that the paranormal and ufology are one and the same thing, or elements are.
Well, I think often when we talk about specific parts of the phenomena that we all love, because I consider myself a Fortean, Brian, rather than a ufologist or into the paranormal or cryptids or anything, because I have an interest in all of it. And so for me, I consider myself a Fortean, or some people have been considerate enough to consider me a Keelian.
Okay.
In regards to that kind of thinking outside of the box and not trying to pigeonhole things. And I think, as you mentioned there, Brian, I think as we've developed and gone through all these various trenches and things and the history of ufology in the modern era since your sighting just after the war, essentially I think a lot of people in this particular field now are pushing the boundaries, like you mentioned there about certain ufologists. If it's a bit weird, they don't want to follow that path, because for some people, if it's not nuts and bolts, Brian, they're not interested. And I think when we talk about these subjects, this is the thing that's always perplexed me sometimes, is that when we consider the basic concepts of ufology, which is unidentified objects spotted in the sky with a variety of differing experiences for people, such as you explained.
Yeah.
When I saw something strange in the sky, I just watched it agog for nearly an hour. Yeah. And I know other people, like you say, who see strange things, be it a ghost or something, Brian, and they fall back asleep immediately.
Yeah.
And some people think, oh, well, how can you do that? And I think when you begin to examine a lot of cases in different fields, the lines between them become blurred. And I think now people are beginning to think, not trying to explain everything as one overarching sort of leaking in from somewhere else, but I don't think these days it's a one-size-fits-all for explanations. Everything has to be done on a case-by-case basis these days, Brian.
I think you're absolutely right. By the way, you mentioned the name there, John Keel. I think Keel was one of the best examples of a genuine researcher into the paranormal and natural, the anomalous. And I still have a lot of time for that man. A really good. He influenced me as well, I should say. But yeah, one of my sightings of a UFO, I'll talk about the ghost stuff later, but one sighting I had that sort of stuck with me. I'd be about 8-9 years old, and it was 7-8 o'clock, and it was either early or late in the year because it was dark, and I was coming up the road from the town, and I glanced up into the sky, and it was quite a clear night, starry night, and I saw, and there were like two things, bright lights. They were coming towards each other quite fast. They didn't touch. They just went toof. They literally shot apart at an incredible rate of speed, almost at the blink of an eye. They shot apart and disappeared. Yeah. So God knows what. I have no idea what that was. I suspect it wasn't an aircraft of any kind of description. I suspect they were UFOs of some kind. But like I say, these events have occurred to me throughout my life. So now I just say, yeah, that's another one, okay. And I don't get all upset about it. Now, events of this kind, again, have happened to me, like I say, my entire life. Examples of this was when I was writing my books. I think, as you said, I've written about 13 or 14 now. But I'd be struggling with something. I'd like to try and find some information about that. Then all of a sudden, the following day, or maybe later that day, something would pop into my inbox, exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah.
It was like the information was finding me rather than the other way around.
Yes.
So like I say, in fact, and I still do, I just say thanks very much.
Yeah.
I just thank whatever did it, but this stuff happens on a regular basis, so much so that it doesn't surprise me anymore. I just accept it and say thank you. Yeah, true.
No, but it is. I think when you sort of open your mind up to these kind of possibilities, Brian, it is remarkable how often these coincidences or these connections seem to come as if we've wished that information out into the universe wherever, and something somewhere has heard us. Sure. And turns the switch or prods the button or whatever that then allows us to receive what we weren't sure we'd even asked for. I know these days some people would say you've manifested it, Brian, perhaps.
Oh yeah, for sure.
These days that seems to be the buzz term for it.
It is manifested, yeah.
When we sometimes start to look at these things, it is strange when you start to unpick things, how it's almost like a snowball effect. You can suddenly start to find other cases and you disappear down different avenues of all kinds of inquiries. Or you'll have a random conversation, or you'll see something, and sometimes it's almost as strange as the phenomena that we're trying to dive into, I think.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Like I say, I don't question anymore because I don't have to look for stuff. It presents itself to me, or maybe I look at stuff through a different lens than the normal guy, and I see anomalies in what I'm looking at, which wouldn't normally be anomalous, but in fact they are. Or maybe I just unconsciously unpick it and recognise them for what they are. And I just let it flow. I just go with the flow now. I don't question it. I don't argue about it. I just go with the flow. But I must say that I haven't written anything lengthy for our 4 or 5 years now, because I just haven't felt the need to write a book. I mean, I wrote, in a period of about 4 or 5 years, I wrote 14 books, and they just sort of flowed out. Yeah. And it was like I was discharging.
Yes.
And once I discharged, there was nothing left. The power had all gone. Yeah. But I still write the odd article for Phenomena magazine, which, to be fair, I stopped editing that just at Christmas time this year. I stopped editing it for health reasons, but I still do the book reviews and stuff for it, which is fine. Yeah.
Well, I think with anything, like you say, sometimes you can have one of those really prolific periods, Brian, where it feels like you've got to get a lot off your chest or out of your system.
Precisely, yeah.
And when I've spoken to some other authors, it's amazing. Some people can do 2 or 3 projects at once. Some people can then dive straight back into it, Brian. So, and then they get to a certain point where they go, I'm done now for a bit. And either take their foot off the gas for a bit, or they just kind of relax. And I think sometimes, especially when you've been in the field as long as you have, Brian, and I mean that in a polite manner, not not certainly in an ageist. I think when you get to a certain point, as you say, you've said everything you need to say about something.
Sure.
And therefore, when you release a new book, clearly it's something that's fired you up to make you want to start typing again and dive into these phenomena, as we were mentioning about the hole in the sky, because this is a whole sort of theory, as we were both liaising about earlier in regards to Keel, because I think Keel was one of the first researchers who kind of sort of unlocked these window areas, because often when we talk about Point Pleasant and Keel's incredible research and experiences that went on there, Brian, that was essentially a window area, because everything was going on there. It wasn't just a strange creature sighting. You had strange lights in the sky. You had weird men in black.
That's right.
You had aliens popping down. Indrid Cold made an experience.
Indrid Cold, yeah.
You had orbs. You had people disappearing. You had these sort of corridors of fear that Keel encountered. There was all kinds of things going on, but often people will focus just on the Mothman. And I've always found that quite strange, that in that whole sort of 14, 15 month period that Keel was involved in it all, the Mothman's a very tiny portion of it.
Sure.
It's all the weirdness that makes up the majority of the Mothman of Point Pleasant, really.
I tend to think, as regards why the Mothman, I think because it's more relatable. It's a single object that's relatable, and people can focus on it because a Mothman, oh yeah, that sounds interesting, but all the rest of the stuff, all the sort of anomalous events that took place around, in Keel's life, in point of fact, turning up at places where he hadn't booked in, he was expected, all this sort of thing, Yes. Who knows? God, who knows? Because, as you rightly said earlier on, when you're in this subject, anything and everything becomes possible. And it's not as if things are right off the table. Everything's on the table. And you're right, because I get the impression that sometimes something's watching me. Something's got, it's got how can I say it? It's got my best interest at heart, because I've never felt threatened by any of this. Okay, I've had a few frights, to be fair, and a lot of people in this, if anybody's in this field and they haven't had a few frights, and they say they haven't frightened, there's something wrong with them. I've had a good few frights.
Yes.
But only because stuff happened. But that is mainly in the sort of ghost busting side of it, which I've also done.
Yeah.
But I don't bother. In fact, the last time I was involved in a ghost case was in Kincardine here where I live. Because somebody had said to one of my granddaughters, oh, something's happening in the house. Oh, my granddad will have a look at that. And I said, well, thanks for that. I said, thanks very much. And the thing is, it was a brand new house. Literally, it was only 3 months old.
Yeah.
It had just been built. The people had moved into it. It was like one of these townhouses, it was built in 3 levels.
Yes, yeah.
And something was happening in one of the children's bedroom. And they were hearing footsteps in it and stuff. And the kids were getting frightened and stuff. So I went up to the bedroom and I did what I usually do. I developed my own form of exorcism. It's not standard it's not a bells, book and candle thing by any manner of means. I go up and I cuss them out and I tell them exactly what I think of them. Yeah. I tell them literally to F off. And I'm not kidding. And I do. And it's that kind of language. And I ask the people involved, don't hang around outside the door because you're going to hear stuff, But I go in there and I work myself into a temper and I literally cuss them out and tell them to get out. And so far, it's worked. Because the other thing is that in the house I live in now, especially when I started the ghost busting, and this is, your listeners, I'm going to give you a warning now. If you're deciding you want to go ghost busting, be very, very careful, because these things can and do latch onto you, and you can bring stuff home with you. I did it twice, and the first time I did it, well, I'll tell you the story. First time I did it, my wife and I in bed were asleep, and then we both woke up, and we were suddenly both awake. And from the room upstairs, which there's only our kids are long married now at the house. The house is boy, just ourselves in it.
Yeah. And
we heard the furniture getting bumped and moved around in the room upstairs. And we looked at each other and we went, So we thought, this is what, and I swear to God, this is the first time I've been frozen with fear, because I didn't know what was going on up there and I was frightened. I was really frightened.
Yeah.
So we hung on, and I think it was about August time, and eventually I started to get light about 4 o'clock in the morning, and we went back to sleep. And we got up in the morning, my wife went to work. By this time, I was retired by that time, so I went upstairs and I went into the room and I cussed it and I told it to get out. And to be fair, and that was a number of years ago. Nothing ever has happened since. There was one other event that happened in the house that it might have been paranormal, it might not. I'm not 100% certain. But I stood in the kitchen looking down at the living room and I told it to get out of my house. I said, because you're starting to frighten me, you're going to frighten my grandkids, and you're frightening my wife. So I said, get out and go now. And I swear to God, it was like a light switch going off. You could almost hear the click. It went. So you can interact with these things. Now, don't ask me what they are, because I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say that I do, because I don't. But I know that there are entities that can and do interact with us, sometimes to our benefit, but most of the time not. And you can get rid of them. If you're really serious about it, they will know you're serious about it and they'll leave. But it's not a thing I'd recommend. If you're not prepared to get involved with these things, do not get into this subject, because it can be very dangerous.
Well, that's often the thing. I think sometimes people will see a program, Brian, or these days they'll see something on social media, and then the next thing they're running around graveyards trying to attract all kinds of things, and then the next thing we've got them being terrified in their own homes. And I think like you say about that case your granddaughter got for you.
Yeah.
I suppose the biggest difficulty often for people like that is they'll go, well, how can my house be haunted? It's only 3 months old. But often they forget
that's right.
But it's been built on land. So therefore, it's not the house that's haunted. It's the land.
It's the land itself.
You've put a house on it, surely.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's what happened. But I must say that I did some work, quite a lot of work, in what was called the Covenanters Prison in one of the churches up in Edinburgh.
Yes, next to Greyfriars, isn't it?
That's the one, the Greyfriars, yeah. And we were able to get into the old Covenanters Prison itself. And there's a lot of activity in there. I swear to God there's a lot of activity in there. But we're not with mediums. I went out with a self-styled magician once, but that's an entirely different story. I'm not even going to go there.
Yeah.
But the mediums went up there, told us quite a few stories. Now, one thing I used to take about with me on a regular basis was my trusty tri-field meter, because these things do react to the presence of electromagnetic fields. And it seems to me, and I don't know why, again, I just don't know why, but it seems that electromagnetic fields and paranormal occurrences seem to go hand in hand in many cases. An example of this, where we were in the Covenanters prison, we were right down at the very bottom end of the prison, past all the mausoleums and stuff, right at the very end. And the meter was lying on this little sort of stone wall. And the medium says, oh, she says, two people have just walked past us. And the meter went full scale down again. And she said, they're coming back. Meter went full scale down again. So it was picking up something, or maybe it was a transient magnetic field, and the medium was interpreting this as a ghost, as a spirit. Again, I don't know, because, like I say, people that tell you that they know how these things operate don't. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so stupid as to say that they do. Because nobody knows how this works. Nobody. Not really.
Well, I think that's human nature, though, Brian, isn't it? That regardless, people want an explanation, or they think that they can explain something and say, well, this is the reason why such and such is happening. But often, like you say, the one thing I know about this field is, yes, I know a fair bit about quite a lot of subjects, but I would never ever consider myself as an expert in anything. Because you're always learning. Always. And you will never reach a point of saturation of knowledge in these particular fields, because nobody can know everything about all these strange cases. And every time you think you do, a case turns up that just makes you look like an idiot.
That's right, absolutely right, because I don't try and as I say, I don't go out and ghost hunting. I just don't do it, because I'm too old for it and I can't be bothered. Because I'm not. That maybe sounds a bit big-headed and offhanded, but it's true. I just can't be bothered doing it anymore.
Yeah.
Because I've seen most of it. Well, right, here we go. The case that took me off the fence as far as paranormal is concerned, it's a little village called Doune, D-O-U-N-E,
yes.
in Stirlingshire, yeah. And it's a place called the Highland Hotel, which was actually, it was like 3 houses that were knocked into one, and this made it into a little hotel. Been there since the 1800s. Now, this place was seriously abundantly haunted, really abundantly haunted. And there was stuff happened in there that really took me off the fence as far as this went. For example, before we actually carried out the investigation, I was there with the 2 mediums that actually did the case with me. And we went to see the woman who owned the place. And she took us up to her quarters, and, to see where she lived in her office and stuff. And we're sitting there, and we're sitting a couple of settees, couches. Fire was on. It was a winter. It was either early spring, very early in the year, or very late, but it was certainly cold, and the fire was on. And I'm sitting beside the fire. It was on my left-hand side. She was sitting opposite me. Her brother was sitting beside me, and there was someone else, I can't remember who it was sitting, like, facing the fire on another settee. And I'm sitting, and she's sitting talking away, and I'm looking at her, watching her, chatting away, and nodding my head and stuff. And I suddenly realised, over her left shoulder, a figure was forming. Okay? It was up against the window, which was closed and the curtains were on, but it was up against the window.
Yeah.
And this started getting more solid, and it was hard to say, but I took it that it looked male. Somehow it looked like a male being. And when this was going on, the temperature was getting lower and lower in the house, in the room. So it's getting cold. This figure is getting clearer and more well-defined. This over her left shoulder. And I said to myself, not now. I don't want this now. Go. This is my head. I'm saying, just go. Please go.
Yeah.
Because you're going to alarm people. Go. It disappeared. The temperatures came back up to normal, and everything just, the room, it was almost like the room breathed out, went, the whole thing relaxed.
Yeah.
And the woman's still chatting away, and I said to her brother, I said, did you notice anything just now? Yeah, he said, it's awful cold. And then he said, it just went again. I said, I didn't say what had happened, but this thing manifested for me. But there was another thing that happened in this place. There was a staircase that went from, if you like, the hotel accommodation upstairs to where the woman actually lived.
Yes.
And we were on this flight of stairs. And one of the mediums was standing with me, and our partner, our husband, in fact, was standing at the door at the top of the stairs. Then all of a sudden, it was like a breeze started to blow down the stairs. I could feel my hair ruffling. And it was a woman called Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie said to me, they really don't want us here. And if they were any stronger, they'd push us off the staircase if they could. And then anyway, the breeze had blown down. Then all of a sudden it stopped, and everything calmed down again. But I had my camcorder with me, and we walked off the staircase, and we turned back and looked towards it, and I was looking through my camcorder, and I was shooting this, taking a video of the staircase. And suddenly this dark rod, if you like, maybe 4 or 6 feet high around there, a black dark rod, made its way down the staircase. I can see this in the viewfinder. Got to the bottom and just disappeared. And I said, did you see that? And she said, no. I said, we wouldn't, because you were meant to see that. We weren't. Simple as that. So yeah, I saw that. There was stuff, and just shows you how crazy this got. We were in one of the bedrooms, and Anne-Marie said, put your hand down there. What do you feel? So I put my hand in this area, and it was like a tingling sensation. It wasn't unpleasant. Just like a little electrical tingling sensation over my whole hand. Yeah. She says, there's the spirit of a dog down there, and that's what you're interacting with. So obviously animals have spirits as well, yes. She said. This was news to me because it's not a thing I'd ever actually considered. But I felt that. So as far as that hotel is concerned, it's still there. It's still functioning as a hotel, but I've never been back inside it since then, 25 years ago. But as far as I know, it's still abundantly haunted, that little place. Because the story appears in one of my books, the case investigation. And a lot because people read it, there've been groups will apparently go along and ask, can they get in and do this stuff? And the people are quite happy to let them, because it generates publicity and custom for them, which is, I suppose, is well and good.
Yes.
So, yeah. Absolutely.
I think it's one of the cheapest ways to advertise your business, Brian, isn't it? I mean, and to be fair, if you've got a 300, 400-year-old converted cottage build up in Scotland, I'd be surprised if it wasn't haunted, Brian, never mind anything else.
Yeah. Well, we did quite a lot of investigations. Stirling Castle was one place we went to.
Yeah.
In fact, some parts of Stirling are pretty haunted. There was a pub we went into, it was pretty haunted as well. But the castle, that was interesting, because different parts of the castle, you could actually walk into it, and it was like walking into, how can I put this? You could feel the resistance as you walked into the room. There was almost like a resistance in there, yeah.
Like it was a thickness.
Aye, yeah, that's a good way of putting it, yeah, Paul.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say anything overtly frightening happened there, but it's certainly a very haunted location, Stirling Castle. But but like I say, I don't go out there doing that stuff now. But everything that I experienced, it appears in one of my books, and it's just one of these things, I guess.
I suppose, Brian, as you've gone through your career, it was when you were saying about sitting on the fence and the fact, as Anne-Marie was saying to you there, about it wanted you to see it, nobody else.
Yeah.
Do you think that was just those kinds of things? Because if you'd have asked me 10 years ago about hauntings and people seeing apparitions, I'd have told you what I thought it was. Now, having spoken to numerous parapsychologists and other researchers, because I was always confused about mass sighting or mass groups of people, Brian, where you'd have 2 or 3 people see something weird and the other 30 wouldn't see a thing.
Sure.
And I always sort of battled with that, and I began to think, well, what can the reasons for that be? And then obviously, as I've developed my understanding and spoken to other people, different people have different perceptions. Everybody's different. We can all see sharper colours,
Sure,
we can all
sure.
take in better detail in a variety
Yep.
of things, we can all hear
Yep.
different
Yep,
frequencies
yep.
often. And
Yep.
so it now becomes obvious to me that only certain people will have certain experiences because they're the ones that are attuned to whatever frequencies these
Sure.
things are
Absolutely. Yeah.
hanging around on, Brian. And so when you've come to this book, Hole in the Sky, obviously this is, well, for me it seems like a natural kind of continuation of your work, because I think you can't work in the fields that you have in before you start to get to these areas where it seems like nothing's off the table.
Sure.
And everything's happening. Was it something that you were aware of prior to the experiences you had at Roslin, Brian, or was this something that came as a real surprise to you, that this wasn't just over eager researchers claiming that their specific area was like a magic portal?
Right. The thing about the book, The Hole in the Sky, which has just been released by Flying Disc Press, Phil Mantle's Flying Disc Press, a lot of what was in that book was, if you like, prompted by other stuff I'd done over the years. Now, I start the book off, part one, The Seed in the Humanity, and it's basically about the human race, how I think we may have got here, and the influences that non-human entities have had upon us. And we end up in Rosslyn Chapel, because Rosslyn Chapel, I can assure you, is a very, very special place. Very special place. Mediums have an absolute field day in there, because when you're in the chapel, have you ever been in Rosslyn Chapel?
It's one of the few strange locations in Scotland I've not visited yet, Brian.
Okay, well, in the east end of the chapel, there is what they call it is, well, I think the sort of Sunday best name is the Retro Choir. But people call it, it's got a different name altogether. And but the locals call it by some another name, which have just gone out of my head, of course, as you would imagine. but in there, you've got two pillars, right? And this is at the east end of the chapel. You've got the kingly pillar on the right-hand side, which is written about all over the place because of the carvings on it. And,
yes.
And the guy whose apprentice carved it killed him because he was so angry that he had actually managed to produce them. He killed him. And the apprentice's face is actually in a little carving up in one of the corners of the chapel. But that's an entirely different story. But
yes,
the actual the portal that I know about, because I know where it is to the edge, okay, and I know what activates it, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. But it was in 1995 would be the first time I actually visited the chapel. Just with my wife, and I took a look up when I walked around and went ooh and all the rest of it. But we went back. I've been to the chapel many times. In fact, I was on first name terms with the guides at one point. But they started getting a bit iffy about letting me in because they knew what I was doing most of the time I was there.
Yeah.
But we went up in 1995 because we knew that there was something very strange about one of the altars that's at the east end of the chapel. Now, as you stand in the chapel looking to the east end, okay, you'll see there are three altars. There's one left, middle, and the right-hand side. There's an altar called the High Altar that can't be used because it's up above the staircase that goes down into the crypt, and it's called the High Altar. But the one on the left-hand side, which is the St. Matthew Altar, that's the one that was a very special interest to me, because we were up there, and my wife was with me, and I was standing. Now the altar, as far as the height goes, it'll be just about up to about there. It's maybe about 5 foot tall. It's not big. They're by no means big, these things.
Yeah.
And I'm standing there with my back against it, and my wife's standing, we're talking away. Then all of a sudden, my arms started to lift up from my sides and float. And I went, ooh, what's going on? And I put them back down, and they started to float up again. Then I felt myself coming off the ground, literally coming off the ground, and I tipped forward. I wasn't floating about or anything, but I was getting literally lifted off the ground. And I thought, there's something very odd here. So I asked my wife if she could feel anything, and she couldn't. But when I went back to this place again I had this impression anyway. So we knew there was something very strange there. So the next time I went back, we went fully loaded with mediums, shall we say, and some good mediums, and we let them take it. There was two husband and wife teams that didn't know each other. They had never met before, these two teams, so that which was fine. And more importantly, they'd never been in Rosslyn Chapel. So we let them walk around, each in their pairs walk around. My wife went with one, I went with the other, and we just waited to see what they were getting. And the thing is, both sets of mediums at the St. Matthew altar were saying, oh, there's something very strange here. They said, they called it an astral doorway. Both called it an astral doorway. And they said, we'll need to be very careful here because stuff goes both ways into this thing. It can come through from that side, or it can go through from this side. We have to be very careful what we're doing here because one of them, in fact, said, I can see them with their hands out begging me to bring them through, okay, these spirits, whatever. So that was all well and good. So by this time, I was working with a guy called Bill Downey. Now, Bill is a musician, and he had devised a series of chords. Now, if I can find them, I'll tell you what they are. Oh, yeah. F sharp, C, and A are the chords. Because we were trying to work out something called, what the hell is it called again? It's a particular chord that the Catholic Church banned in the Middle Ages because it was causing disquiet when this chord was produced. Yes. And it was causing disquiet in the congregation. And some people were actually tripping out and they were getting their own visions of the supernatural, if you like, of God, of Christ, of the angels, and all that. So, and it was only when this particular chord was actually produced. And F sharp, C, and A was the chord. But it wasn't. But what we were interested in, what are these specific frequencies? Because we were wanting to reproduce this, okay? Yeah. So F sharp is 370 hertz, C is 535 hertz, and A is 880 hertz. And we reproduced this chord using a signal generator because we're up and down. We used to drag all sorts of gear into the chapel, all sorts of pieces. Yeah. And the thing is that when we produced a particular chord, F sharp, C, and A, one of the mediums went, oh, she says, my God, she says, come over. And she was standing with her back to the altar where I had been. So I went across, and the thing, I guess, in length from the actual altar to the end of where, because there's actually one of the Sinklers who built the chapel. He's actually buried in here. Yes. He's actually buried there. And I was standing about 6 feet away from her, facing her. And you could feel this cold air rushing up from her feet, okay? And it was intensely cold. The chapel is not exactly warm at the best of times, but this was really cold. And you could put your arms out, and it was almost as if you were going through a barrier. Yeah. You could feel the warmth on the outside, or it was warmer, and bring your hands back in, and it was cold. So there was definitely a barrier being set up there. And they said, and the medium said, they're trying to get through because you're producing that tone and you're activating this thing. So we said, well, it might be safer if we put this off. Yes. So we just switched the signal generator to the speakers off. Yeah. And it just went, it literally just collapsed. Boom. So the other thing that happened was that one of the guys who was there was an acoustic therapist. And he did this, he produced tones of his own. And the thing was, he didn't know this was going on at the time, but he had gone down into the crypt. It's not actually a crypt, but we call it the crypt. Yeah. We call it the crypt. And he started toning, okay, whatever the tone actually was. Yeah. And we were actually messing about with a signal generator, and we were producing our own tone. So there's a tone coming from him, there's a tone coming from the signal generator, and they're running in parallel. So all of a sudden, we're just sort of listening to this, and all of a sudden, another tone appeared. The chapel was producing a tone entirely on its own, based on what we were producing. And we thought, oh my God, that's a bit odd. Then a few moments later, a fourth tone kicked off. So the chapel was producing two harmonics, if you like, based on what we were producing. Now, I've never heard of that before. That was the first time I'd ever encountered anything like that before. And nobody else had ever heard of it either. But the chapel was actually producing that because when the guy down the stairs stopped toning, the other two tones went click, click. They stopped. And all we're left was the sound that was coming from the signal generator. So, we honest to God, we really don't know what to make of that. But the chapel is designed to do an awful lot that we're not aware of yet, because when Sir William Sinclair, he paid for it to be built back in the 1500s. When he paid for this place to be built, we think, or some of the mediums think, he hid something there. And he hid something on the other side of this portal, because he didn't think the human race was actually ready for this thing. So whoever he was, he hid it on the other side of this portal. But he also left the key to unlock it, which is the tones.
Yes.
Which we just, and that was literally a fluke. That was that was a fluke. We didn't set out to do this. And we just happened on it. Or this guy, Bill Downey, Bill found this series of notes, and it works. So I think if we could open this, if we opened the portal, there's something on the other side of that portal, and we think Sir William Sinclair hid it there. That although it's still theoretically it's accessible, you really need to know what you were doing big time to get your hands on it or bring it through. Although what it is we had, we suspect it's spiritual in nature, some sort of spiritual object, or an object of some kind it would have to be.
Yeah.
But we've also had people actually, when they knew I was interested in this, I've had letters and emails literally from all over the world. Not so much now because I stopped investigating it about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But we see stuff from all over the world of people telling us what they thought was buried in the chapel. More importantly, what was actually concealed in some of the pillars, inside the pillars. I mean, I've heard it said that the mummified head of Jesus Christ is actually hidden in one of the pillars of Rosslyn Chapel. Now, I doubt it. Personally, I doubt it. But knowing the number of stories I've heard about that place, I mean, the story about the portal, because I know where it is, it's right at the St. Matthew altar, but there was a story went about for years that the physical gateway to heaven was actually in the chapel, but down in the crypt.
Yeah.
So I think that this physical gateway to heaven may be a reference to this portal. I suspect that's what it actually is. But once again, who knows?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the issues you've got, especially about Roslin, whilst I'm no expert, Brian, I know little bits about it. I know one of the things is that people have started to sort of ascribe descriptions to certain gargoyles and heads in the chapel. I know one of the most famous ones I think is Moses, and he's got a pair of horns on his head.
That's right.
And people have described it. Oh well, it's Satan. But if you look at the original, as far as I'm aware, it was a mistranslation.
It is.
And they're not horns. They're supposed to symbolise knowledge coming out of his head.
That's right. I know the particular carving you're talking about because I've seen it myself. Yeah.
And so on top of all this, obviously from that point on, you've had. I mean, it seems like a million years ago now, Brian. But you had the whole Da Vinci Code cult, as it were, where you couldn't move for that book being everywhere. And Dan Brown and I would imagine Rosslyn Chapel were like, oh my God, after about 6 months, how many more tourists can we have turning up here?
Well, I'll tell you a little story, just a quick story about that. My wife and I were actually taking photographs in the chapel. It was just before the film was actually made.
Yes.
Point of fact, they hadn't shot the film yet, and we were in the lady chapel I'm talking about the lady chapel they call it.
Yes.
And I was standing on a pair of steps taking photographs of the cubes.
Yeah.
That are in the chapel. Yeah. Now the cubes in the chapel roof, in the lady chapel roof, they come from the columns and the arch up to the centre, and there's actually 3 of these columns come up from it, and they're actually stone cubes carved as musical shapes. Okay. They're the shapes you would get if you sprinkled fine sand on, say, a copper plate or a plate of glass, secured it and used a violin bow.
Yes.
And struck a tone. Then the fine sand would take up patterns. That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what these cubes are. That somebody deliberately created music and they put this music in the form of the cubes. Now I've heard a couple of attempts people have had to transpose this into musical notes. They might be right, they might be wrong, but the point is this: the people that did it, the 2 pieces of music aren't the same. So I think it's just been toss a coin and make your choice. Seriously.
Yeah.
But I mean, if people want to ascribe that to it, well and good. And who knows, one of them might be right. But what would happen in the chapel if that music was recreated is another story. Because if it was, I'd like to be there when it is. But there again, if the chapel did what we made it do when we played this music using a signal generator, the doorway, the portal, we think it started to open, or we were doing something with it. It was certainly reacting to the music, and it may have been trying to open, which is why we turned the whole thing off.
Yeah.
Because we panicked.
Yeah.
I'm not lying, we panicked, simple as that, because we didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's not one of these things where you bravely go, well, you've turned the volume up, let's see. No, we weren't that brave. We switched it off. But like I say, the people in the chapel now are very, very leery of letting anybody do anything like that in the chapel now. They just won't do it.
Yeah.
See, we were lucky, and perhaps we sort of, perhaps we were responsible for them not letting people do stuff in the chapel now because of what we were doing. But there was nothing particularly dangerous happened. But I think that they just realised that because a lot of groups want to carry out rituals. We know that a lot of Masonic order, a lot of the Freemasons, because there's a lot of Masonic imagery in the chapel. Yeah. And we know the Freemasons sometimes carry it. They'll let them do it because they're, if you like, they're kind of legitimate, if you want to put it that way. But there's groups of magicians, witchcraft, they all try and get in the chapel to do their stuff. And the authorities just say, no, forget it. Don't even try it. Don't even attempt it.
Yeah.
Because there is a place, a location in the chapel that is very, very powerful. Mm. And that is, again, if you're facing the east of the chapel, what you see is the altar, and you've got the 3 altars and all the rest of it. But to the right of that, there's a flight of stairs goes down into the crypt. Okay, it's not a crypt, but they call it the crypt. And we noticed that down in there, there's a how can I put it? There's a sensation, there's a feeling down in there of something. Just quote, there's something down there.
Yeah.
And I personally wouldn't like to act upset or activate anything that might be in the script, but there's certainly a feeling of immense latent power down in that crypt. We'll call it the crypt. We'll just leave it at that. But what it is, I don't know. We haven't been brave enough to find out. And besides, they won't let us back in to do it anyway. So simple as that. Yeah.
I think it's interesting though when you talk about frequencies and chords and notes, Brian, because as we're developing our understanding of previous civilizations, especially here, there are certain locations for cairns and barrows in Scotland and around other areas where people have suddenly realised that if you hit certain tones or you play a certain note, it resonates inside these buildings. And like you say in the introduction, and as I mentioned as well, there are cultures and tribes all around the world on virtually every continent where music and sound has been part of rituals for all kinds of things, whether they are outside or inside. And it seems it's only recently that we've become aware of the abilities of our ancestors here in the UK who would create these buildings that would resonate in a certain way if you, as we were saying about that, some of them would use crudely constructed, what we would consider violins using guts and bones, Brian, to create a squeaky noise, or people, they would get the best vocalization in the community to hum or sing or just produce tones. And so Roslin, in that kind of situation, isn't too dissimilar. It seems like this kind of thing has always gone on, but it's one of those things that we seem to have lost knowing about in the past, and then we've rediscovered it and gone, oh, well, actually, all these people that lived here 3,000-4,000 years ago weren't idiots. They were actually quite clever. We just forgot about it.
I can tell you how we realised there was something very special sonically about the chapel. This would be again in the 1990s, and we'd only been there a couple of times, just visiting, just to get a feel for the place. Yeah. We walked in, and we were standing in the east end of the chapel, and we were just looking about. And this American lady walked in, and she started toning, right? And she hit this series of frequency of vocal, just mouth-only tones. And everybody in the chapel just went, whoa, because the place lit up sonically. We said, what the hell is going on here? And then she stopped. She said, oh, am I upsetting people? And we said, no, carry on. Because when she started toning, the whole place just lit up. Yeah. It was incredible. And there were maybe about 20 people in the chapel then. And they were all walking about, and they all stopped. And they all looked at each other, and they looked at her. Because you could feel something very, very special was happening. And I think she realised it as well, but I think she got a bit embarrassed and she just stopped and left. Yeah. But that's when I first realised that there was something very unusual about this chapel in relation to sound.
Yeah. Well, I think often we forget that our ancestors on all continents, Brian, they would use music to work themselves up to to a fever pitch.
Yes.
As if they would then be in the state of mind to communicate with whoever they wish to. And as you say, I think when you look at things in the framework of a specific religious dogma, be it Christian or Islam or Buddhism or whatever, you then frame an experience or a location in your belief system. Whereas, as we were saying about Roslin, I think the biggest issue you've got with Roslin these days is that it's been completely embraced by the Knights Templar factions, and therefore it's very difficult to unpick what's real, what's make-believe and what's wish fulfillment, because often it becomes such a sort of morass of misinformation, Brian, that it's hard to take away what's fact from fiction, especially with everything that's happened there over the last 20 years.
Right. I belong to an organisation called the Sonny Air Society. Have you heard of them?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm involved with the Sonny Air Society. I have been since the first time up in Scotland. That'll be about 30 years ago. They used to meet in the Templar Lodge Hotel in Gullen. But latterly, I think that closed down. They just have their meetings as and when they can. They currently have them in the Masonic Lodge in Roslin, believe it or not.
Right.
That's where they have their meetings.
Yeah.
I've given a couple of presentations to them, and I'll always take up, if I have any new books, I'll take them up and I'll always take the books and sell them and stuff. But the Sonny Air Society made me very aware of the Rosslyn Chapel and things associated with it. Henry Lincoln is one of the guys that was involved with it. Old Henry is dead now.
Yes.
Passed on. But Henry used to speak to them as well. It was all about stuff related mainly to the Knights Templar, because, and I'm going to be brutally honest here, there's a lot of bollocks talked about the Knights. It's sheer bollocks. It's utter nonsense talked about them.
Yes.
They could do this. No, they couldn't. Okay, they were warrior monks. That's fair enough, and they were, and they were highly skilled in battle, and people were actually afraid of them.
Yes,
because the Saracens were terrified of these guys. If they saw them on the battlefield, the Saracens would leg it, because these guys would not leave the battlefield as long as there was one of them still alive.
Yeah.
They'd fight literally to the bitter end. Very, very accomplished warriors. But there's been a lot of nonsense talk, sheer nonsense talked about them. Yes, they were monks. Yes, they were warriors, but that was it. There was nothing particularly magical about them. The talk of them as being endowed with magical powers. No, they weren't. They were just good fighters, end of. I mean, some of them might have had, because they were monks, that have some sort of mystical training as far as being a monk is concerned.
Yes.
But there was nothing all that different about them other than they were very good warriors, and rightly so. There were people that were frightened of them were right to be frightened of them, because these guys would kill you at a second compunction.
Yes. I think it's interesting because obviously there's a lot of connection with Oak Island off the coast of Nova Scotia in Canada. Yeah. And I find it very interesting that for me, I always get really annoyed when they start talking about who got to America first, and they just don't talk about the Vikings.
Yeah.
And also ignore the fact that nobody got to America first. There were people living there.
That's right.
We just turned up. So, let's put that right. But obviously there is a lot of people who are obsessed with the Knights Templar, who are convinced that the Holy Grail or whatever is buried on Oak Island.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because of the Knights Templar being tasked with saving all the holy relics from Jerusalem during the Crusades, and that's where everything went. That's why we can't find anything.
Well, can I just stop you there talking about the Holy Grail? Now, there are a lot of different views about what the Grail actually is.
Yes.
It is normally presented as this elaborate gold jewel-encrusted vessel. Now, if that was the cup of Christ, it wouldn't be an elaborate gold, beautiful, it'd be a very plain little cup. Yeah. Because what else fire the money? There was nothing rich about Christ or his family. They were broke. They had no money at all.
Yeah.
So if there was a Grail, it'd be a very, very plain thing.
Yeah.
But I've also heard it suggested that the Grail is not an object at all, that the Grail is a woman's womb. I've actually heard that suggested as well.
Yeah.
I really came across it someplace.
Absolutely.
But the stories about the Grail, I watched it, the Indiana Jones and all the rest of it.
Yes.
It's splendid entertainment, but people should remember that. It's an entertainment. It's there to entertain you. It's not based on fact.
Yeah.
It's just a nonsense. but I learned a lot about stuff from the Sonny Air Society, and it actually helped, if you like, supply the the material for some of my books because of stuff that I heard and learned, and that drove me to go and research further stuff myself and take it from there, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's all part of it though, because like you say, it's amazing what gets prescribed to the Templars, because as part of this whole Oak Island thing, they're basically saying, well, they must have convinced the Vikings to take them to America. And I'm thinking, well, why? Why do you not think the Vikings just stole everything? Because that's what they did.
That's what they did. Yeah.
And they took it, and they're going, oh, well, they've got their symbols and they're carved and they're saying they may have copied them. And it's really odd to me that they've made this leap that we know the Vikings were the first Europeans to cross the Atlantic. We know that now.
Yeah.
Well before Columbus turned up 400 years later or whatever.
Later, that's right, yeah.
But to me, the Vikings are one of those cultures where wherever they went, they took everything that they valued, be it gold, silver, people, whatever. If they were, if we're, as we're led to believe, they ended up making pilgrimages because obviously towards the end of the 10th, 11th century, they began to convert to Christian beliefs and caused civil wars in the whole Viking faction. Which sort of led it. So obviously a lot of them would do pilgrimages into the Promised Land and Jerusalem and Bethlehem and places. Why would they not take everything that the Templars believed was magical and valuable and whatever? Why didn't they just take it? Instead, now we've got, well, the Templars must have paid them to take them to America. But that's not what the Vikings did.
No, they didn't do that sort of thing at all.
No, they weren't known for favourable voyages.
Actually, but as I say, the amount of nonsense that's talked about the Templars is actually quite startling. All you can say with any certainty was they were a very powerful group in Europe, immensely powerful. In fact, I can't remember one of the French kings. I can't remember which one it was.
Was it Philip?
King Philip the Fair. That's right.
Yeah. Owed him loads of money, so he killed them all.
Pretty much, because France was beholden to the Templar treasury.
Yes.
Simple as that. Because they were the wealthiest group on the planet at the time.
Yeah.
And they lent money to everybody.
Yeah.
But Philip the Fair was actually terrified they were going to foreclose on him and actually kick him off the throne. Simple as that. And they could have done it if they wanted. Yeah. Because the Templars, people seem to forget that the Templars answered to no one except the Pope.
Yeah.
Simple as that. He told them what to do, and if they were of a mind, they actually did what he said. But a lot of the time they didn't. They just did exactly what they wanted to do. I mean, Jacques who was the last Grand Master? Jacques de Molay. That's right. He ended up burned at the stake for his pains. But de Molay, he was the last Grand Master of the Templars, and after he died, well, a lot of the Templars ended up in Scotland because they literally just went go poof. They just got away as far as they can.
Yeah, scattered.
And there's a place called Temple up here in Scotland, which is, in fact, the Temple tell you what it is. But it's on the west coast, if I remember rightly. There's quite a lot of Templar relics up there, because that's where they ended up in the west of Scotland. Yeah. They sailed their boats up. And, I mean, they went to various places. Some of them went to Germany as well, and they tied up with the Teutonic Knights. They tied up with them. But a lot of them came to Scotland and they sort of set up their monasteries and things up here. And in fact, there are still traces of them still about.
Absolutely. Well, to be fair, there isn't a strange story I've not heard about the Templars or the relics, Brian. I know on the Fortean Times message boards there was a person who regularly would claim to own the Holy Grail. He lived in Stourbridge in the West Midlands, but he's got the Grail. He's got it, Brian.
Good lad. Good luck to him.
You can't see it, but he's got it. Okay? Yeah,
absolutely.
And I would imagine you've met many a person like that.
I have indeed. In fact, I subscribe to Fortean Times in point of fact. Yeah. I've got a stack of them over here on the right-hand side lying on a stool. Yeah, I subscribe to Fortean Times, but for a long time, I gave up on it. Yeah. In fact, I spoke, whose editor just now is David... I'll come back to me. I spoke to the editor a while back, about 10, 12 years ago, and I said, look, and because we used to phone each other quite regularly, I used to phone him, chat to him quite regularly, and I said, I'm giving up my subscription. And he said, why? I said, because you talk about the same stuff every month. It's the same old. It's the same people talking about the same things, and it's boring. He says, is it? I said, yes, it is. So I gave up the subscription, and I didn't buy it for 10 years. I just gave it for 10 years. But I read a copy maybe a year and a half ago, And I resubscribed because I quite enjoy it coming through the door again. Read it.
Yeah, same here. Nearly 30 years I've been subscribing, Brian.
30 years, yeah. Well, I would say in total, I subscribed for about 12 years. That's not including the break, of course.
Yeah. I think it was seeing Malcolm Robinson talk about it in the 90s on cable TV, I think, that convinced me to sign up, Brian.
For Fortean Times, yeah, really? Yeah.
When Malcolm used to sport his moustache.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
So, I mean, before I let you go, Brian, obviously this book takes us all around the world. As we mentioned, we talk about Roslin, but obviously there are other areas like this. Do you think this is one of those parts of strange phenomena that the more we look at these things in a different way, the more places like this we're going to uncover around the world? I
suspect yes, because I think you'll find, although the same phenomenon exists in different locations of the film, it's given different names. Okay, It's the same phenomena, different title. So in that sense, it's hidden, But once people realise it and see that that's everything, that's all the same thing. It'll be, I think that a lot of doors will be open, a lot of windows will be open, and a lot of light will get in, because people, I think, they're still afraid of the unknown, obviously. But some of the stuff that's discussed, as what we're talking about, that it's the same subject, different name, just a different name, But it's like there's nothing new under the sun, as they say, and there isn't. It's just that what people are less afraid of it now than they were, I think, or maybe they realise that they see it for more or less for what it is. But there's always a lot of stuff we haven't talked about, and I doubt we'll get time tonight. But some of the stuff we have discussed so far, I still haven't got to the bottom of it. As I've written, is it 12, 13, 14 books, some of that order. I'll need to count them sometime. I can't remember. But the thing was that each book, the first book I wrote was comprised of articles, if you like. I put them into themes, put it into 3 or 4 parts, and that was the first book. It didn't take much writing because it was already written.
Yes.
But all the books have stemmed from there. They've all been aspects of the book before it. And I found it, and I expanded on it, wrote about it, and there was an aspect of it, and that was the next book. And it went on till eventually I ran out of things to write about, and I think I just got lazy because the thing was I was sitting in this room, or depending where the computer or one of the computers was at the time. I'd be sitting in there for nights and days at a time, hours at a time. And I didn't have the time for it anymore. I got fed up with it, got bored of it.
Yeah.
Then when I started editing Paranormal magazine, that took up hours and hours and hours of time. The editorial was okay. I just come, I'll write an 400 words the editorial. Knock off an editorial, but you were having to edit the articles. You were having to proofread the magazine before it went out, stuff like that. And it just took too much time, which is why I went after 10 years. On 10 years I stopped editing for Paranormal magazine. Steve and I, we're still mates, we're still pals, and I still do the book reviews, as I said. But it's a guy in Venezuela, would you believe it, that actually edits it now. He's the editor. Dario. There's no Franchetti. It's Dario something else. Can't the poor soul's name.
Yeah.
But he lives in Venezuela, and he's the editor. It just shows you how truly international the magazine is. But I still do the odd magazine. Apart from the book reviews, I still, if I can be bothered, I'll just dash off a couple of thousand words, maybe 2,500 words. There's an article. There you go. Take it away. And I'll sort out the pictures for them and send it to them, and then usually I'll stick it in. But that magazine, that's been a blast to do, an absolute blast.
Yeah.
Because I've met some amazing people through it. Astonishing people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's doing a job like that you actually you're exposed to stuff that you don't normally get to see.
Yes.
And think people don't even want to talk to you about it. And I think they don't want to talk to you because they're not sure if it's real themselves.
Yeah.
And are you going to believe them? Well, the thing is, I've heard some stuff in there that you think, even I'm thinking, is that right? Can that be possible? But the thing is that there are so many aspects and hidden rooms in this subject that it could well be right. It could well be right.
Yeah, I think that is the difficulty. I mean, often when we walk this sort of tightrope, Brian, between strange phenomenon. As you say there, often there are niches and secret chambers that you can often walk past, or you might disregard as a younger person. You know?
Sure.
And I look back at myself, and I always used to think I was very open-minded and had a real appreciation of the weird. Doing this show for 5 years, I realised I knew more than normal people would consider, because once you enter the weird, you're never back really with the real world, shall we say. But I realised that there were so many other facets of weird phenomenon that I knew next to nothing, or I'd previously dismissed, Brian, because I just thought it was too silly or too trivial. Sure. And so when you have experiencers who have strange, mysterious incidents that occur to them, or they see strange things, even they, as you say there, question, am I just imagining this? But I think the internet has allowed people from all over the world, suddenly they realise that they're not the only person that's seen that thing. Somebody in the States has, somebody in Australia has, somebody in Burma might have seen it.
Whatever,
And now all of a sudden they know they're not going mad, and I suppose that aspect of it is brilliant for people who are terrified to open up about it, because even for experienced people such as ourselves, Brian, even we can sometimes go, are you being serious here? This is the strangest story I've ever heard.
I would say that the strangest stuff for me is not the paranormal per se. It's the ufological side of it, the UFO side of it. So there's some stuff comes out of there, and you're going to yourself, is that right? Can that be right? And you've got to allow yourself, I suppose, a certain leeway that you can dismiss stuff, because you can't accept it all, because it can't all be right. And besides, you've got to set yourself some parameters.
Well, Brian, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you for the first time. I hope it's not the last. I will hopefully track you down and pick your brains about numerous other aspects of your wonderful career over the years. Where can everybody get hold of your previous books and also your most recent one, Hole in the Sky?
Well, Hole in the Sky, all my books are on Amazon. Okay, so if you even go into Amazon and put the Hole in the Sky, that will obviously bring the Hole in the Sky up. But if you put my name in, that'll bring up any books that they have that are mine. That'll bring them all up, and you should be able to get with it there just on Amazon. It's the simplest way of doing it.
Fabulous. So, as you were saying, you've kind of given up everything. Are you planning on collecting more articles, or are you waiting for the next inspiration before you unleash anything else on us, Brian?
Well, I wrote a couple of articles over the last couple of days, because something came into my head. I'll write about that.
Yeah.
And so I've knocked off a couple of articles, but they're basically intended for Phenomena magazine, and they'll end up going out through there. Although I do sort of send them to other people as well. The Sun Air magazine, I've written some stuff for them. Just stuff as I feel inclined to do, so I'll just write something. If it comes into my head and I think it's worth writing about, I'll write about it, because I think in the books I've written, I don't want to go down this road because I'll be here talking forever, but I had a look at a lot of comparative religion.
Yes.
Because when you look at religion and magic, there's no difference. Okay? And when you look at the likes of Jesus Christ and all that, and the angels and all the rest, and you look at ETs, what's the difference? There is no difference. It's only the concept is different.
Yeah.
But the actual phenomena are just the same.
Yeah.
I mean, ascend, coming down from the sky, all the rest of the flying around. For ETs, I would say that's identical to ET phenomena. But I've said this at meetings, and I've had my face clawed off. I've had women standing up in the audience shouting at me and pointing, I was a Satanist and all the rest of it. Oh, come on. So I just say, well, thanks very much, madam. Thank you very much for the considered opinion. That sort of thing. But yeah, I do tend to say exactly what I think.
Yeah.
And some people like it, some people don't.
Absolutely. But at least you're always honest and upfront, Brian.
I am, absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, listen, it's been a real pleasure to speak with you. I'll put the links into everything up for the show notes, my friend. And I just want to say, I wish you all the very best, and hopefully we'll speak again in future, Brian. Thank you.
I would look forward to it. Thank you very much, Paul. Take care.